All right, today we are diving into a book that is, let's just say, an absolute bombshell. Frantz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth. This thing was written right in the middle of the fire of revolution, and man, it does not pull any punches. It forces you to ask some really tough, really uncomfortable questions about power and freedom. So, let's get right into it.
So, right at the core of Fanon's entire argument is this one question, and it's a question that still just stops you in your tracks. How on earth can violence be a cleansing force? It sounds wrong, right? But to even begin to understand what he means by that, we have to look at the man himself and the world he came from. Okay, so Fanon wasn't some academic sitting in an ivory tower. This guy was a psychiatrist and a full-blown revolutionary. I mean, look at this timeline. He was born in a French colony, Martinique, but the real turning point, the experience that forged all these ideas, was his time in Algeria. He was there during its brutal war for independence, working as a psychiatrist. And get this, he was treating both sides, the French soldiers who were torturing people and the Algerians who were being tortured. He saw up close and personal the insane psychological damage that colonialism does to everyone it touches. And that experience, well, that became the heart and soul of this book.
All right, let's tackle the big one head-on. Idea number one, violence as a cleansing force. Now, I know what you're thinking, and it's really, really important to get this straight. Fanon is not just glorifying violence for its own sake. Not at all. He's making a very specific, very deep psychological and political point about what colonialism is. He kicks off the book with this line that just hits you like a ton of bricks. He says, decolonization is always a violent phenomenon. For Fanon, this isn't him saying this is what you should do. It's him saying this is what is. Think about it. Colonialism wasn't set up with a friendly chat and a handshake, right? It was established with guns, with force, with violence. So Fanon's logic is, if a system is built entirely on violence, how else can it be taken apart?
And this is absolutely key to understanding him. He makes a huge distinction between two kinds of violence. On one hand, you've got colonial violence. This is the violence of the system, the police, the soldiers, but also the day in, day out psychological beatdown that tells you you're worthless, that dehumanizes you. Then, on the other hand, you have revolutionary violence. Fanon sees this as a response, a reaction. It's the moment the oppressed person fights back. And in that moment, something breaks. The fear, the submission, it shatters. It's that act of resistance that allows them to grab back their own humanity.
So, here's the bottom line on this first point. For Fanon, violence isn't really about capturing a building or winning a piece of land. It's about psychology. It's about liberation inside your own head. See, colonialism is so insidious that it teaches the colonized to hate themselves, to see themselves as inferior. So when they finally fight back, when they physically say no, Fanon says that's a moment of incredible release, of catharsis. That's the cleansing part. It purges that poison of inferiority. It's the exact moment a person goes from being something that history happens to someone who makes history.
And that idea of breaking free psychologically leads us perfectly into his second big concept. And that's how the colonial world is split, just completely and utterly, into two separate zones. He has a very specific word for this, Manichaeism.
So, what is Manichaeism? Well, originally it was this ancient religion that saw the whole universe as this epic struggle between pure good and pure evil, light versus darkness. And Fanon just takes that idea and applies it brilliantly to the colonial world. Because that's exactly how colonialism thinks. There's no gray area, no complexity. Everything is either good or evil, civilized or savage, one or the other. And this quote from Fanon just nails it. The colonial world is a world divided into compartments. It's not just a metaphor. He means it literally. The world is physically, mentally, and spiritually cut in half. There's no common ground. There's the colonizer space, and then there's everyone else's. And you can see how this plays out on the ground. The colonizer zone, right? It's all clean streets, solid buildings, order. It's built to look like the world of light and civilization. Meanwhile, the colonized zone is deliberately cast as its opposite. It's seen as a place of chaos, filth, darkness, and evil. And this is so much more than just rich versus poor. It's a physical map of a moral verdict. The system justifies its own violence by saying, look at them. They're not like us. They're evil. They're less than human. In a world divided like that, empathy is impossible. Okay, this brings us to Fanon's third big idea. And this one is a little more theoretical, but it's maybe the most powerful. It's where he takes a look at classical Marxism and says, yeah, that doesn't quite work here. He explains how colonial power isn't just one thing. It's everything, everywhere, all at once.
So, quick detour into Marxism 101. The classic idea is that society has a base. That's the economy, right? Who owns what, who does the work. Then you have the superstructure. That's all the other stuff, culture, politics, art, ideas. And the superstructure is basically built on top of the base to keep it running smoothly.
But Fanon looks at the colonial situation and says, nope, you can't pull those two apart. In the colony, the economic theft, taking the land, stealing the resources, isn't just explained by racism. The racism is the reason for the theft. The two are completely fused. You can't have one without the other. The racism is the economy is the racism. It becomes this single, unbreakable system of total control that gets a hold of not just your wallet, but your mind.
And this is his incredible insight, summed up in this quote. In the colonial world, the base is the superstructure. They're welded together. This means you can't just fight for better wages or land reform. Why? Because the entire system is propped up by the idea of racial inferiority. To get free, you have to tear down the whole rotten structure, the economic part and the ideological part, all at once.
So you might be asking, why are we still talking about a book written way back in 1961? Why does it still feel so raw, so relevant? I think it's because Fanon gave us the vocabulary, a way to see how power works, not just out there in the world, but inside our own heads.
Once you understand Fanon's ideas, you start to see the echoes of colonialism all over the place. You see it in modern economics, in what we call neocolonialism. You see it in the stubborn persistence of systemic racism. You even see it in how movies and media can push one way of life as the only right way. And his work, man, it's still the inspiration behind movements today that are fighting for more than just new laws. They're fighting for that deep, internal, psychological freedom he talked about.
Okay, so let's boil it all down. What are the big takeaways? 1. Colonialism is born from violence and maintained by violence. 2. It creates a black and white world of us versus them to justify itself. 3. It's a total system where economic greed and racist ideas become the exact same thing. And the biggest point of all? Real liberation has to happen on two battlegrounds at once, out in the world and inside your own mind.
You know, it's so easy to just focus on the violence in his work, but it's absolutely crucial to remember where he was going with all this. Fanon's endgame wasn't just to tear things down. His ultimate vision was deeply humanistic. He was dreaming of creating a brand new world, a new kind of human, one that wasn't trapped in the cages of race or power, a world where every single person's dignity was a given.
And that leaves us with one last massive question to chew on. If Fanon is right, if the systems that hold people down control both what they have and what they think, where does freedom even begin?